The massive space station called Harmony 3 was alive with sounds and colors that Earth had never seen before. Children from dozens of different alien worlds ran through the wide hallways, their voices mixing together like a cosmic symphony. Among them, 12-year-old Keisha Williams moved with pure wonder in her eyes, her dark skin glowing under the station's artificial suns. Keisha was special on this station. She was the daughter of Ambassador Dante Williams, the man who represented all of humanity in these first talks with alien civilizations. But right now, she wasn't thinking about politics or diplomacy. She was just a kid amazed by the incredible things around her. The Valari children showed her gardens that floated in mid-air without any soil. Plants grew in shimmering bubbles of light, their roots drinking from streams of liquid starlight. Keisha reached out to touch a flower that sang when the wind hit it, and the Valari kids giggled at her amazement. They had long, graceful necks and skin that changed colors with their emotions, currently showing happy yellows and greens. Down another corridor, the Theran youngsters were proud to display their crystal farms. These weren't just pretty rocks, they were living crystals that the Therans grew like humans might grow vegetables. Each crystal hummed with a different musical note, and when the wind blew through them, they created haunting melodies that made Keisha's heart feel both happy and sad at the same time. It's like living inside a fairy tale, Keisha whispered to her new friend Zix, a young Valari whose skin sparkled with excited purple dots. The tour guide, a tall robot with a gentle voice, announced that their next stop would be the Quantum Power Core, the heart that gave life to the entire station. This was the most important part of the tour, the guide explained, because it showed how different species could work together to create something beautiful and powerful. The observation deck overlooked a massive chamber where pure energy danced in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The core was protected by multiple barrier fields, each one glowing with different colors. Red fields contained the raw quantum energy, blue fields kept radiation from escaping, and green fields made sure nothing could go wrong. Dr. Amora Johnson, the human medical officer assigned to the station, stood nearby with her scanner ready. She was a careful woman who always worried about safety, especially when human children were involved. Something felt wrong to her, though she couldn't explain what. The energy readings seemed normal, but her instincts screamed danger. "Stay close to the barriers, children," she called out, her voice carrying the authority that came from years of keeping people safe in dangerous places. Keisha pressed her face against the protective window, watching the energy swirl like a miniature galaxy. The alien children around her chattered excitedly in their various languages, pointing out details that their species could see but humans could not. That's when everything went wrong. The first barrier field flickered like a candle in the wind. Then it died completely. The second barrier lasted maybe 3 seconds longer before it collapsed with a sound like breaking glass. The third and final barrier held for a heartbeat before dissolving into nothing. Exotic quantum energy poured into the observation deck like a deadly waterfall. The alien children had built-in protections, their bodies could handle radiation that would kill most Earth creatures. The Valari kids' skin turned silver, automatically reflecting the dangerous energy. The Therans became crystal-like, their bodies hardening to protect their vital organs. But Keisha was human. She had no special protections, no evolutionary defenses against quantum radiation. Dr. Johnson threw herself toward Keisha, her medical scanner screaming warnings about lethal energy levels. She grabbed the girl and activated her emergency medical kit, trying to create a protective field around them both. But it was like using an umbrella in a hurricane. The energy hit Keisha like invisible fire, burning through her cells faster than her body could repair itself. She collapsed, her skin turning pale as her immune system began shutting down organ by organ. Medical emergency. Dr. Johnson screamed into her communicator while working frantically over Keisha's still form. "I need a full medical team and an isolation chamber now." Ambassador Williams burst into the observation deck, his face twisted with a father's worst nightmare. He dropped to his knees beside his daughter, taking her small hand in his much larger one. "Hold on, baby girl," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Daddy's here. You're going to be okay." But Dr. Johnson's expression told a different story. The quantum radiation had done too much damage too quickly. Keisha needed treatment that only the most advanced council medical facilities could provide, and she needed it within minutes, not hours. Ambassador Williams activated his diplomatic emergency channel, reaching out to every council member he could contact. "This is Ambassador Williams requesting immediate medical assistance for my daughter. She's been exposed to quantum radiation and is dying. Please, someone help us." The responses that came back were cold and bureaucratic. Forms needed to be filled out. Proper channels had to be followed. Medical intervention required approval from 3 separate council committees. The process would take at least 6 hours. 6 hours? Williams shouted into his communicator. My daughter will be dead in 30 minutes. This is a child's life we're talking about. Councillor Thex of the Zephyrian Collective finally responded personally, his voice carrying the bored tone of someone discussing paperwork rather than a dying child. Ambassador Williams, surely you understand that proper procedures exist for good reasons. We cannot simply bypass centuries of established protocol for one individual, regardless of species. Williams felt something break inside his chest. She's 12 years old. She's just a little girl who wanted to see the stars. And that emotional response, Thex replied coldly, is precisely why humans remain unsuited for true galactic civilization. Your primitive attachment to individual lives over proper procedure demonstrates your species' fundamental immaturity. Dr. Johnson worked desperately with her limited human medical equipment, but quantum radiation damage was beyond anything she could treat. She watched helplessly as Keisha's vital signs continued to weaken, knowing that council medical technology could easily save the girl's life if they would only act. Keisha opened her eyes one last time, looking up at her father with the same wonder she had shown throughout the day. Daddy, she whispered, the stars are so beautiful. Then she was gone. Ambassador Williams held his daughter's lifeless body and felt something die inside himself as well. Around him, alien children watched in confused silence, not understanding why the human adults were making such strange noises. To them, death was simply a transition, nothing worth such emotional display. The official council report would later classify the incident as equipment malfunction resulting in acceptable casualty levels. They offered standard compensation of 50,000 credits and suggested that humans needed better safety training before participating in future cultural exchanges. When Williams demanded a full investigation into how 3 separate safety systems had failed simultaneously, Councillor Thex's response was swift and final. The matter is closed, Ambassador. Perhaps this tragedy will teach your species the importance of accepting your limitations. SF. The small white casket descended from the council transport ship like a piece of broken dreams. 2 flags covered it, the stars and stripes of Earth, and the golden spiral of the Galactic Council. To most people watching, the council banner looked like an honor. But to those who knew what really happened, it felt like the aliens were laughing at human pain. Keisha Williams came home to a world that had never been so angry. Every television screen, every internet feed, every radio station carried the same story. A 12-year-old girl had died because alien bureaucrats cared more about paperwork than saving a child's life. The footage of Ambassador Williams begging for help while his daughter lay dying had been leaked to the media, and now 8 billion people had seen the cold indifference in Councillor Thex's voice. Protests erupted in every major city on Earth. In New York, crowds gathered around the United Nations building carrying pictures of Keisha and demanding justice. In London, people laid flowers outside the American embassy while singing old songs about standing together against oppression. In Tokyo, silent vigils filled the streets as people lit candles for a little girl they had never met but somehow loved. But the anger went deeper than protests and vigils. This wasn't just about one child anymore. This was about dignity, about being treated as equals, about the fundamental question of whether humans deserved respect from species that claimed to be more advanced. Ambassador Williams watched his daughter's funeral on television from his childhood home in Detroit. He couldn't bear to attend the service, couldn't face the cameras and the questions and the sympathetic looks that felt like pity. Instead, he sat in the same living room where Keisha used to play during visits to her grandparents, surrounded by memories that now felt like torture. The house had belonged to his family for generations. His great-grandfather had built it with his own hands after returning from World War II. His grandfather had raised 5 children within these walls during the Civil Rights era. His father had renovated the basement when Williams was a boy, creating a workshop where they had built model airplanes together. Now Williams found himself alone with ghosts and grief, cleaning out spaces that no one had touched in years. His grandfather's attic had always been off-limits when he was growing up, filled with mysterious boxes and old furniture covered by dusty sheets. His grandmother used to joke that Grandpa kept his secret spy stuff up there, though no one ever took her seriously. Behind a stack of National Geographic magazines from the 1960s, Williams found something that shouldn't have existed. A metal box, painted military green and locked with a combination that had been worn smooth by decades of use. His grandfather's birthday opened it easily, revealing documents that made Williams' hands shake as he read. Operation Deep Watch, Classification Level Omega. Eyes Only. Authorized Personnel, Solar Defense Command Inner Circle. The papers were old, some dating back to the 1600s, written in languages that had evolved over centuries. References to Guardian fleet operations and long sleep protocols filled page after page of reports that officially didn't exist. Williams called President Angela Davis directly, using the emergency line reserved for genuine national crises. When he explained what he had found, there was a long silence on the other end of the phone. "Bring everything to Washington immediately," the president finally said. "And Williams? Don't tell anyone else about this." "Not yet." The emergency cabinet session that followed would later be remembered as the day America learned it had been living a lie for 4 centuries. President Davis sat at the head of the table in the Situation Room, surrounded by the most powerful people in the government, while Williams spread out documents that rewrote human history. General Derek Thompson, head of Solar Defense Command, had been quiet during the initial briefing. He was a massive man with scars on his hands from his time as a Marine, someone who had spent his entire career protecting America from threats that most people never knew existed. Now he cleared his throat and began to speak in a voice that carried the weight of secrets held too long. "Everything the public knows about our space program is a carefully constructed lie," he began. "We didn't discover faster-than-light travel 50 years ago when we made first contact with the Council. We've had it for over 400 years. The room erupted in shocked voices, but Thompson continued without pause. The first human FTL ship launched in 1623, built by a secret coalition of European scientists who were terrified of what might be waiting in the darkness between stars. They were right to be afraid. He activated a holographic display that showed the solar system, but this version contained objects that didn't appear on any public star chart. Massive structures orbited in the outer darkness beyond Pluto, hidden from Earth's telescopes by technology that bent light around them like water flowing around stones. Project Deep Watch has been operational for centuries, Thompson explained. Every generation, volunteers disappear from official records and join the Guardian fleet. They enter cryogenic sleep and wait in ships scattered throughout the outer system and beyond. 15,000 vessels, each one crewed by people who gave up everything to protect Earth from threats we hoped would never come. Secretary of Defense Patricia Hayes leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're telling us that we have a secret space navy that's been hiding for 4 centuries. "Not hiding," Thompson corrected. "Watching. Waiting. Learning everything there is to know about every species in this galaxy while they remain completely ignorant of our true capabilities." President Davis studied the holographic display showing Council space, now marked with tiny dots representing human observation posts that had been operating undetected for decades. "How many people know about this? On Earth? Maybe 1,000, scattered across different agencies and military branches. Each person knows only their small piece of the puzzle." Thompson's expression grew grim. "But out there, sleeping in the cold between stars, are the crews of 15,000 ships. Men and women from every generation who volunteered to become humanity's hidden guardians." The president stood and walked to the window, looking out at Washington, D.C., where millions of people went about their daily lives, unaware that their entire understanding of human history was about to change. "Counselor Thex thinks humans are primitive and emotional," she said quietly. "He thinks we're too weak and too stupid to survive in galactic civilization." She turned back to face the room, and her expression carried the fury of 8 billion people who had watched a child die while aliens filled out forms. "General Thompson," she said, her voice carrying the authority of the most powerful office on Earth, "I think it's time to wake up our guardians. Let's show the galaxy what happens when you murder a human child and call us primitive for grieving." Far beyond the orbit of Neptune, in the cold darkness where sunlight was barely a distant star, something ancient began to stir. The massive warship Retribution had been sleeping in the void for over 400 years, its hull covered in ice and cosmic dust. Inside its armored heart, cryogenic pods that had kept their occupants frozen in dreamless sleep began their warming cycles for the first time in centuries. Admiral Zara Mitchell opened her eyes slowly, her mind fighting through the fog that always came with long sleep. The revival chamber was filled with soft blue light and the gentle hum of life support systems coming back online. Sensors attached to her body monitored her vital signs while warm air gradually replaced the supercooled atmosphere that had preserved her for so long. Her first conscious thought was always the same after each sleep cycle: she needed to know if Earth was safe. Mitchell had been born in 1634, had lived through plague and war and revolution, had volunteered for the Guardian fleet when she was 25 years old. That was 4 centuries ago, though her body had aged only a few years thanks to the miracles of cryogenic preservation. "Status report," she whispered, her voice rusty from disuse. "Is Earth secure?" The ship's artificial intelligence, a program that had been continuously learning and evolving while she slept, responded with a voice that carried both respect and sadness. Admiral, Earth remains physically secure, but there has been an incident that triggered the awakening protocol. As the revival process continued, Mitchell's mind cleared and her body regained its strength. She was a small woman with dark skin and eyes that had seen too much history, someone who had learned to command not through shouting but through absolute competence. The AI began briefing her on everything that had happened during her latest sleep cycle. The story of humanity's first contact with alien civilization should have been wonderful news. For centuries, the Guardian fleet had watched the skies, ready to defend Earth from threats that might come from the stars. Instead, humans had been invited to join something called the Galactic Council, a partnership of hundreds of species spread across the galaxy. But then came the part that made Mitchell's expression turn to stone. A human child had died because aliens couldn't be bothered to save her life. More than that, they had dismissed human grief as primitive and suggested that humanity was too emotional to deserve respect from advanced civilizations. "Show me the footage," Mitchell commanded. She watched Ambassador Williams begging for help while his daughter lay dying. She saw Councillor Thex's cold dismissal of human concerns. She witnessed the aftermath, a planet in mourning, protests demanding justice, and the alien response that treated it all as an overreaction to an acceptable loss. Mitchell had lived through the worst of human history. She had seen slavery and genocide, had watched people die from diseases that could have been easily cured, had witnessed the cruelty that humans could inflict on each other. But she had also seen humanity's greatest strength, their ability to care about individual lives, to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves, to rage against injustice even when it seemed hopeless. "Wake the fleet," she ordered. "All ships, all crews. It's time." Across the outer solar system and in the dark spaces between stars, 15,000 human warships began their awakening sequences. These weren't the sleek, graceful vessels favored by Council species. They were fortresses built for war, designed by people who understood that the universe was a dangerous place and that survival required both paranoia and overwhelming firepower. Captain Leon Hayes commanded the stealth destroyer Vengeance, a ship that could slip through space undetected and strike without warning. He had volunteered for the Guardian fleet in 1789, leaving behind a wife and children to serve humanity's future. Now he awakened to learn that future had arrived, and it wasn't what anyone had hoped for. Commander Maya Robinson led a squadron of assault frigates, fast ships designed to swarm larger vessels and tear them apart with concentrated firepower. She had joined in 1856, after watching her hometown burn during the Civil War. She had sworn that no human would ever again face destruction while others stood by and did nothing. Ship after ship came online throughout the hidden fleet. The dreadnought Unbreakable carried weapons that could crack planets. The carrier Defiance launched swarms of fighters that moved too fast for alien sensors to track. The battleship Righteous Fury bristled with armor that could withstand anything the Council species could throw at it. Each vessel had been designed with one purpose: to counter the known capabilities of every species humanity had ever encountered. While the public space program pretended to slowly develop rocket technology, the Guardian fleet had been studying alien civilizations for centuries, learning their weaknesses and preparing for the day when knowledge might need to become action. The crews emerging from their long sleep represented every generation of human history. Veterans of ancient wars served alongside people from more peaceful times, united by their commitment to protecting Earth no matter the cost. They spoke different languages, came from different cultures, but they shared the same rage when they learned what had happened to Keisha Williams. Throughout the fleet, the vote was taken ship by ship, crew by crew. Should they reveal themselves to the galaxy? Should they show the Council what humanity was really capable of? The result was the same on every vessel: unanimous agreement that the time for hiding was over. Admiral Mitchell stood on the bridge of retribution, looking out at displays that showed the positions of every ship in her fleet. For 4 centuries, they had remained hidden, watching and waiting for a threat that might never come. Instead, the threat had come from those who claimed to be allies. "Attention all vessels," she broadcast across the fleet's secure network. "Council species believe humans are primitive and emotional. They think we're weak because we value individual lives over bureaucratic procedures. They murdered a child and called us unsuited for civilization because we dared to grieve." She paused, thinking of all the generations who had sacrificed everything to keep this fleet ready, all the people who had given up normal lives to serve as humanity's hidden guardians. Today, we show them what human emotion really means. We show them what happens when you mistake compassion for weakness, when you confuse love for primitive behavior. Her voice carried across 15,000 ships, reaching crews who had awakened to find their worst fears realized. Take positions around every council world, every military installation, every trade route. Move silently, strike nothing, but let them know we're there. When I give the signal, we decloak simultaneously and show them what 4 centuries of human preparation looks like. Admiral Mitchell had spent lifetimes preparing for this moment, hoping it would never come but ready when it did. Now she would teach the galaxy a lesson that civilizations throughout history had learned it too late: never mistake human kindness for weakness, and never, ever, harm their children while expecting them to quietly accept it. Let's remind the universe, she said quietly, why humanity spent 400 years getting ready for war. The Grand Assembly Hall on Centralis stretched for miles under a dome that showed the swirling colors of the galaxy above. For over 2,000 years, this chamber had hosted the quarterly gatherings of the Galactic Council, where representatives from 947 different species came together to shape the destiny of civilized space. Today felt like any other session. The Zephyrian delegation argued about mining rights in the Outer Rim. The crystal-based Therans complained about trade route regulations that didn't account for their unique biology. The gas-dwelling Verati demanded better atmospheric controls in council facilities. Standard business that had been going on for centuries, conducted with the same boring efficiency that made galactic civilization function. In the human section, a small area near the back that most species barely noticed, sat Ambassador Tanya Brooks. She was a sharp woman with intelligent eyes and skin that had been weathered by years of diplomatic battles. Brooks had replaced Ambassador Williams after his resignation, stepping into a role that most people considered a dead end. After all, what could humans possibly contribute to discussions between species that had mastered faster-than-light travel when Earth was still discovering fire? The morning sessions dragged on with mind-numbing discussions about tariff adjustments and territorial boundaries. Representatives checked their personal devices, whispered to their assistants, and generally treated the proceedings like a necessary but boring part of their jobs. The Galactic Council had become so large and so established that real change seemed impossible. When lunch break ended, Council Speaker Mortex, a towering creature with 6 arms and skin like polished metal, announced the afternoon's schedule. Minor species concerns and administrative matters, he declared in a voice that suggested these topics were barely worth their time. Ambassador Brooks raised her hand and requested permission to address the assembly. A few representatives looked up from their devices with mild curiosity. The human section was usually good for some entertainment. Their emotional speeches about fairness and justice provided amusing breaks from serious business. The assembly recognizes the human representative, Speaker Mortex announced with barely concealed boredom. Please keep your remarks brief. Brooks stood and walked to the center podium, her footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. She carried a single data pad and moved with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was about to do. The assembled representatives expected another tearful plea for justice regarding the dead human child, a topic they had already decided was closed. Honored members of the council, Brooks began in a clear, steady voice that carried to every corner of the hall. I come before you today not to beg for justice, but to present evidence of a crime that strikes at the very heart of what this council claims to represent. The chamber grew slightly quieter. This wasn't the emotional outburst they had expected. Brooks activated her data pad, and holographic displays appeared throughout the hall showing technical readouts from Harmony 3 station. These are the actual maintenance records from the quantum power core on the day Keisha Williams died. Notice the deliberately modified safety protocols, the remotely disabled backup systems, and the scheduled maintenance that was mysteriously cancelled just hours before the tour. Murmurs began spreading through the assembly as representatives realized they were looking at evidence of sabotage, not accident. The technical data was undeniable. Someone had deliberately caused the containment failure that killed the human child. Furthermore, Brooks continued, her voice growing stronger, we have communication logs showing that Councillor Thex of the Zephyrian Collective coordinated these modifications as part of a plan to demonstrate human weakness and justify our expulsion from the Council. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Councillor Thex rose from his section, his scaled skin flushing with angry colors. These accusations are outrageous. Humans are clearly fabricating evidence to avoid accepting their own incompetence. Brooks nodded calmly. I expected you to deny it, Councillor. Just as I expected the Council to dismiss this evidence without proper investigation, exactly as you dismissed the life of an innocent child. Supreme Councillor Vex, the ancient leader of the Primary Assembly, gestured for order. Ambassador Brooks, these are serious allegations that require proper channels and formal review processes. You cannot simply present data and expect immediate action. Proper channels, Brooks repeated, her voice carrying a bitter edge. Formal review processes. The same bureaucracy that let a child die while forms were being filled out. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives who suddenly seemed uncomfortable. You've made your position clear, Supreme Counselor. Justice delayed is justice denied. Accountability is less important than procedure. Human lives matter less than paperwork. The hall fell silent. Even the most cynical representatives could hear the pain and anger in Brooks' voice, emotions that suddenly didn't seem primitive or excessive. Therefore, Brooks announced, her voice carrying clearly to every corner of the vast chamber, humanity formally withdraws from the Galactic Council and revokes all treaties, trade agreements, and diplomatic accords effective immediately. Supreme Counselor Vex's expression shifted from annoyance to concern. Losing humanity wouldn't be a major economic disaster, but it would set a dangerous precedent. If minor species could simply withdraw when they didn't get their way, the Council's authority would be undermined. Ambassador Brooks, he said carefully, surely we can discuss this rationally. Withdrawal from the Council is a serious step That's when every alarm in the chamber began screaming. Red warning lights flashed throughout the hall as the Council's defense systems detected something impossible. The main tactical display, used for showing trade routes and territorial boundaries, suddenly filled with new contacts. Thousands of them. Ships that hadn't been there moments before, now surrounding every major Council world, military installation, and trade route. The chamber descended into chaos as representatives from dozens of species began shouting at once. The tactical display showed 15,000 vessels in perfect military formation, their positions chosen with surgical precision to threaten every vital point in Council space simultaneously. This is impossible. Supreme Counselor Vex whispered, staring at the display in shock. Our sensors would have detected any fleet movement. These ships would have taken months to reach these positions. Ambassador Brooks smiled for the first time since taking the podium. Your sensors detected exactly what we wanted them to detect, Supreme Counselor. Which was nothing. The massive central screen that usually showed peaceful images of the galaxy now displayed the face of Admiral Mitchell, broadcasting from the Bridge of Retribution. She wore the uniform of humanity's true military, not the simple diplomatic attire that Council species had grown accustomed to seeing from human representatives. Greetings, Galactic Council, Admiral Mitchell said in a voice that carried 4 centuries of patience finally reaching its end. I am Admiral Mitchell of the Human Guardian Fleet. For those of you who believed humanity was a primitive species that stumbled into space travel 50 years ago, I have news for you. The chamber was dead silent now. Every representative stared at the screen showing a woman who radiated the kind of authority that came from commanding vast fleets in the darkness between stars. We've been spacefaring for longer than most of your civilizations have existed, Mitchell continued. We've been watching your species, learning your weaknesses, and preparing for the day you showed us your true nature. Today is that day. Counselor Thex stood shakily, his scales now showing the pale colors of fear. You're bluffing. This is some kind of holographic deception. Humans don't have the technology for this. Admiral Mitchell's expression didn't change. Computer, tactical display Zephyrian homeworld. The screen shifted to show Thex's home planet, now surrounded by human warships in perfect attack formation. Similar views flashed by showing every major Council world under the same shadow. We've been in position for hours, Counselor Thex, Mitchell explained calmly. Your superior senses never detected us because we've spent 4 centuries perfecting the art of being invisible when we choose to be. Supreme Counselor Vex found his voice again, though it shook with shock. What do you want? What are your demands? Justice, Admiral Mitchell replied simply. Accountability. And respect for the species you dismissed as too primitive to matter. The most powerful military force the galaxy had ever seen had just revealed itself, and it belonged to the species that the Council had treated as barely civilized newcomers. The age of Galactic Council supremacy was over. The age of human equality had begun. The silence in the Council chamber stretched for what felt like hours, though it was probably only seconds. 947 different species stared at tactical displays showing their homeworlds surrounded by human warships that had appeared from nowhere. The impossible had happened. The species they had dismissed as primitive newcomers had just revealed the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever seen. General Corax of the Zephyrian Defense Fleet was the first to break the stunned silence. His voice crackled through the communication system as he tried to rally the Council's military forces. All fleet commanders, this is General Corax. Prepare for immediate mobilization. We will not be intimidated by human deception. But even as he spoke, reports began flooding in from across Council space. The Varans discovered that their crystal-based weapons had been infected with a virus that turned their own technology against them. The Varati found their gas giant shipyards mysteriously losing atmospheric pressure. The elegant Altarian fleet tried to engage their faster-than-light drives, only to discover that their navigation computers had been quietly rewritten over the past several hours. Admiral Mitchell's voice cut through the growing panic with calm authority. "General Corax, I suggest you check your fleet status before making threats you cannot back up." The massive tactical display in the Council chamber shifted to show real-time feeds from military bases across Council territory. Zephyrian warships sat dead in space, their energy weapons mysteriously offline. Therein crystal formations that powered their defenses had gone dark. Varati battle stations hung in empty space like abandoned shells. "How?" Supreme Counselor Vex whispered, his ancient voice barely audible. "Our technology is centuries ahead of anything humans possess." Admiral Mitchell's expression remained perfectly calm. "Your technology is elegant, sophisticated, and completely dependent on systems that we've been studying and infiltrating for longer than your species has had spaceflight. You built beautiful weapons that work perfectly, as long as nobody has spent 400 years learning exactly how to break them." The truth hit the Council like a physical blow. While they had been dismissing humans as technologically inferior, human infiltrators had been mapping their systems, learning their weaknesses, and preparing countermeasures for every possible threat. The Guardian fleet hadn't just been hidden, it had been actively sabotaging Council defenses for centuries, so quietly that nobody had even noticed. Captain Leon Hayes appeared on a secondary screen, broadcasting from his stealth destroyer that was now visible orbiting the Zephyrian homeworld. "Your energy shields are impressive against energy weapons, but they do absolutely nothing against a chunk of metal moving at 10% of light speed. Your exotic matter manipulators can deflect plasma and radiation, but they can't stop a nuclear warhead that's already inside your shield perimeter." The genius of human military design became clear to everyone in the chamber. While Council species had developed increasingly sophisticated weapons over millennia of technological advancement, humans had gone in the opposite direction. They had built crude, simple, devastating weapons that countered sophistication with raw kinetic force. But Admiral Mitchell didn't order an attack. Instead, she leaned forward in her command chair and spoke with the voice of someone who held the power of life and death over entire civilizations. "Supreme Counselor Vex, I didn't reveal the Guardian fleet to destroy you. I revealed it to ensure you understand the consequences of your actions." The chamber fell silent again as species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia waited to learn their fate from the humans they had dismissed as primitive. "Humanity has 3 demands," Admiral Mitchell announced. "First, Counselor Thex and everyone involved in murdering Keisha Williams will be handed over to face human justice. Second, the Galactic Council will issue a formal apology acknowledging that a child died because of your indifference and cruelty. Third, humanity will be granted full membership in Council governance with permanent seats on all major committees, not as junior partners begging for scraps, but as equals." Counselor Thex rose shakily from his seat, his scales now showing the pale colors of absolute terror. "You cannot demand extradition. I have diplomatic immunity. The Council will never agree to." "The Council," Supreme Counselor Vex interrupted quietly, "will agree to whatever prevents the extinction of galactic civilization." He looked around the chamber at representatives whose worlds were currently surrounded by human warships. "We accept your terms, Admiral Mitchell." The trial of Counselor Thex became the most watched event in galactic history. Broadcast across 1,000 worlds, billions of beings watched as evidence was presented showing how the Zephyrian had orchestrated the death of a human child to prove that humans were too emotional and primitive for galactic society. Under oath and facing the destruction of his homeworld, Thex finally confessed. "Yes, I arranged the accident," he admitted, his voice breaking. "Humans were becoming too influential, too accepted. They needed to be shown as the primitive creatures they are. I never intended for the child to actually die. I thought their crude medical technology could save her." The confession sent shockwaves through Council space. Species that had considered themselves civilized were forced to confront the fact that their representative had murdered a child to make a political point. The moral authority of the Galactic Council crumbled in that moment, replaced by the simple human principle that some things were more important than politics. 6 months later, the Galactic Council had been completely restructured. President Davis stood at the podium where Ambassador Brooks had revealed the truth, but now she spoke as the leader of one of the Council's most powerful members. Beside her stood Keisha's parents, their presence a reminder of why everything had changed. "We didn't come to the stars seeking conquest," President Davis said, her words broadcast to every world in Council space. "We came seeking friendship, partnership, and a place in the larger community of intelligent species. We wanted to learn from you, to grow alongside you, to build a better future for all our children." Her voice hardened as she continued. "But when you killed our child and dismissed our grief as primitive emotion, you taught us a lesson we will never forget. You showed us that kindness without strength is meaningless, that friendship without power is just another word for weakness." The reformed Galactic Council now included humanity as a permanent member with veto power over major decisions. Human representatives sat on every important committee, their voices carrying the weight of 15,000 warships that everyone knew were still out there, still watching, still ready. The Guardian fleet had returned to the shadows, but their presence was felt everywhere. Trade routes that had operated for millennia now carried the invisible escort of human vessels. Diplomatic meetings proceeded under the watchful eyes of sensors that nobody could detect. The galaxy had learned to function under the protection of guardians who asked for nothing except that everyone remember the cost of harming innocent children. Where Harmony 3 had once stood, a new station was built and named Keisha Station. Human and alien children played together in its corridors, their laughter echoing through halls protected by defensive systems that could have held off entire fleets. Hidden sensors monitored every system, every person, every breath of air that the children breathed. Admiral Mitchell had returned to the cold sleep of the outer system, but her final message was carved into the station's central memorial where Keisha's name was written in 100 different languages: "We are humanity. We remember our dead, we protect our children, and we never forgive those who mistake our compassion for weakness. Touch one of ours again, and discover why we spent 400 years preparing for war." The galaxy had learned to live with a new truth, that the most dangerous species in known space was the one that cared so much about individual lives that they would move mountains to protect them. Humans had not become the galaxy's rulers through conquest, but through the simple demonstration that some things were worth fighting for, and that those who harmed children would face consequences that lasted for centuries. In the end, Keisha Williams had not died in vain. Her death had awakened a sleeping giant and taught the universe that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their weapons, but their absolute refusal to let injustice stand unopposed. The galaxy was safer now, watched over by guardians who asked for nothing except that everyone remember what happened when you made humans angry.